Welcome to Extreme Reloading. In this episode, we're actually going to start the reloading process. Up until now, we've been focused on case prep, from the bare essentials to extreme. Well, the first step in actual reloading, once we have those cases prepped, is the priming process. We're going to prime these cases, and here I have 10 of those 556 cases that we worked on earlier. What I have done when we finished that case prep process, the very last step was where we sorted those cases by head stamp. And the way I store those things, especially stuff like 556, this type of brass here, is I will put them in these little sandwich bags, and I'll put a little note on them with an initial count. Of course, I've taken some out of here, but this is FC. This is Federal Champion. Got another LC, that's the Lake City, Winchester, Hornady, whatever. You may not have, bags for absolutely everything. You may end up with an other bag. I do that too. But once we actually want to take, in this case, 10 cases out for reloading, I'll double check those head stamps just in case I made a mistake. And sometimes we're also lucky enough, as in this instance, I found 10 of these Federal cases that had the exact same head stamp. Now, what do I mean by that? And oh, by the way, before I move on, one of the things that I do is I take some of these little silica gel packs. You can buy those. I bought a whole bunch of them, big bag of these things from Amazon a number of years ago, and I seal these up. Now, the reason I do that is one of the just about the end or final step in case prep is where we use the ultrasonic cleaner. I let them dry, all this good stuff. Try to get them as dry as possible. But it's possible that there is a drop or so of liquid still left in these things. So I pop in one of those really inexpensive little silica gels, and it will absorb that little bit of moisture that may still be in that. Okay, so we've got that. Then I went through that case or that bag of cases, and lucky for me, I found 10 Federal Champion cases with a 17 head stamp. 17 head stamp. Well, what in the world does that mean? That means that this brass was created in 2017. Okay, so I've got lucky. This is going to be some pretty consistent brass. It's probably from a very similar lot of brass. And this is all 556 brass, by the way. These three over here are different types of Federal Champion brass. This is 2014. I could still load those. They're similar enough. And another 2014. And this one is a Federal Champion from 2022, but it's 223 Remington brass. So I'll try to keep these as absolutely uniform and consistent as possible. At least the same head stamp Federal Champion. Okay? So a little bit of luck there on our part, or on my part, and probably going to give us just a little bit extra uniformity and consistency in our finished ammo. I'd like to note once more the importance of that case prep process, which is specifically the primer pocket uniforming. When we do that, what we're doing is we are making sure that the walls of that primer pocket are straight as possible, and that the depth of the primer pocket is uniform depth, case to case to case, and that the sealing of that primer pocket is nice and flat. Okay? So, just a little bit of a reminder there. Take care of those primer pockets, and that is going to pay some benefits and dividends for you. Now, before I actually jump into the actual priming process, let me talk a little bit about primers. And this is one of the reasons why I started it from bare essentials all the way through extreme reloading. If you're a seasoned reloader, you might want to jump forward a little bit. If you're new or just curious what I'm going to talk about, then certainly stick around. But we need to talk a little bit about primers themselves. There are, as I said earlier, two sizes to primers, small and large. Then within that, we have small pistol primers and small rifle primers. On the large side, we have, you guessed it, large pistol, large rifle. Then, inside of each of those four categories now, we have, the brands will normally also put out what they call either bench rest or match primers. It's a higher quality primer. How is it higher quality? Well, the story goes that the people who are actually doing the work, the more seasoned and experienced people working in those factories, will be the folks assigned to work on the match or bench rest line. I don't know if that's absolutely true, but the real difference is in the uniformity of the quantity of the priming mixture that goes into each of those priming cups. Okay? And is that just marketing? No, I don't think so. I've read lots of other people that agree with me on that. And the deal is that they tend to give you more consistency in your finished ammunition. And that very initial spark is, as we're learning, so important to crafting highly uniform and consistent ammo. So here we have some examples. This is all small rifle primers. These are all small rifle primers. Standard CCI, I really like CCI. This is small rifle primers, number 400 by CCI. Now we have a CCI small rifle BR4. That's a bench rest, okay? That's a bench rest primer. Now we have some more. We have the Federal small rifle match primer. This one would be equivalent to or analogous to that CCI bench rest primer. So very, very similar. If you can't find one, maybe you can find the other. Then we have this, Federal small rifle match AR. Okay, this is specifically the AR match. Now, I thought this might be just a bunch of marketing, but I tested these, and it seems like the amount of priming mixture that they put into those is set to really, really work well with 5.56 and 2.23. So, I really like to use that when I'm loading or reloading 5.56 and 2.23. However, when you're loading target ammo, blasting ammo, some range ammo, you're just going to have some fun with it. Certainly nothing wrong with this stuff right here. Standard small rifle primers. You might also find Remington, Winchester, some other name brand, but standard small rifle primers will allow you to craft safe and reliable ammo, and it'll be fairly less expensive than some of these other options I've just shown you. But there are, or were, other differences between the different brands of ammo. Years ago, and I don't know if this is 100% true today, but years ago, some primers were known to have soft metal cups. Federal tended to be on the soft side, and others had hard metal cups, and that tended to be the CCI. Some of those cups tend to have thicker metal. Those tended to be the military, milsurp type of primers. And I've seen tests where people, some years ago now, almost 10 years ago, some people actually did tests on the toughness of the brass, of that primer cup. And they did really a nice job at that, did some pretty good engineering types of tests. And what we saw is that in pistol primers, Again, CCI had the hardest of primer cups, I'll say hardest of primers, and Remington had the softest. That same rule of thumb applied to the rifle primers, CCI being the hardest, Remington being the softest, Federal, Winchester, those sorts of things kind of intermingled there. I don't know, as I indicated earlier, if I think that is still the case today. Why is that? Well, what we're seeing is that there's a lot of these companies that are merging. The company, in fact, that owns Federal is the same company that owns now CCI, Vista Outdoors, and Vista was recently bought out by a Czech group from Czechoslovakia. It used to be Czechoslovakia, Czech Republic. And that is the same company that also owns Fiocchi. You might see some of those primers out there. Another Czech group owns Cellier and Bellet and Colt and all this stuff. So what we're seeing is that some of these very large corporations are purchasing other companies, and they are amalgamating all these companies together into fewer and fewer actual companies. Normally, the result of this is a homogenizing of the products. They're going to still package those in the CCI wrapper, and another bunch of primers will be packaged in the Federal primer packaging and branding and so on, because they understand brand loyalty. Some people really like CCI, and some people really will only shoot or only use Federal, match, whatever. They understand that. But I am not so sure if today and in the future, if we're really going to be seeing much difference in a lot of these different primer components, because those companies, as I said, are merging and amalgamating. But understand this, that there is still a difference between small and large primers, still a difference between small pistol and small rifle, large pistol and large rifle. And there's a difference in the Magnum primers. That is still something you need to be aware of. To appreciate the priming process, it's actually kind of important to understand how primers work. I know. You already know all that. The firing pit hits the primer explodes, it ignites, and then this flash goes through the flash hole. You're right. That's all correct. But the sensitivity of the primer changes from when it's here in the box to when we actually seat it into that case. The sensitivity of that primer increases. In other words, it has been sensitized to an impact, much more so here than there. And that's actually part of that primer seating process. When we insert that primer into the primer pocket, and this is also why the depth of the primer pocket is important, that primer is pushed up into the priming pocket, and that makes an actual physical change to the primer itself. The anvil is pushed closer to the base of the primer cup, thereby making it more sensitive to an impact. And this is why we really need to seat the primers correctly. A correctly seated primer will be slightly recessed below the head or rim of the case itself. Now, the reason for that is, one, the obvious one, we don't want a slam fire. In other words, when this, let's say a loaded cartridge, is picked up by the bolt and closed, pushed into the chamber, and that bolt closes, that action on a free-floating firing pin can allow that firing pin to keep moving forward and impact the primer itself. If the primer is set back quite a ways, flush, let's say, or it actually is sticking out, we don't want that, don't do that, it can just cause a slam fire. You never squeezed the trigger, but that process fired that case. But the other reason why we want to have a correctly seated primer is for what I was talking about earlier, right? So that consistency of or uniformity of our ammo is increased by having a very uniform seating on our ammo. So let's start the reloading process. And to do that, I have another checklist. This is my reloading checklist. And the very first step there says, read previous reloading notes. You might just be rereading the notes you left on your case prep or notes from the last time that you actually loaded, in this case 5.56. And you may have written down something, but take a look at that stuff to see what happened last time. And you may have also had other notes about powder charges or seating depth of the bullets, whatever it is. Refresh your memory on that. And then we're starting that reloading process just like we did. Put the date in, the cartridge, 5.56, the brass Federal Champion, FC, the quantity, 10. Okay? And then whenever I'm working with precision rifle loads, I'm not going to do that with these 5.56, but I write down, I measure, and I write down the average neck outside diameter. I've only got 10 cases here. I would go ahead and measure all of those, take a quick average of that, and write it in. If you've done your work really well, there will be no real averaging necessary. It'll be really, really consistent. We use that number later on, near the end of our reloading process, to calculate or estimate our neck tension on those bullets. But then the next step is priming, okay? And I've got in big red letters there a reminder. Thoroughly wash your hands in this prep process. In other words, before I actually touch any primer, I am going to almost surgically scrub these hands. I actually like to use dish detergent because a person's hands, of course it varies, but a person's hands will have oil on them. Oil is the nemesis of primers. Okay, so I like to remove all that oil, thoroughly dry my hands, don't want any water either, and then I will start handling primers. Before I do any of that, though, I'm going to take the primers that I'll be using today and make sure, don't have a bunch of different stuff out on the bench. In fact, before I start loading today, I'm going to clear this bench and I'm only going to have one box of primers out here. I'm going to dispense the correct amount of primers into my priming tray. And as you look at this priming tray, you'll see all these concentric rings around it. This is really an ingenious little invention. You're going to dump these primers in, and some of those primers will be anvil side up. That's how we want them. Some will be anvil side down. Just a gentle shake of this primer tray on your reloading bench, and you will see those primers flip over. Once they flip over, it's hard to get them to flip back. You want all the anvils up. That's perfect. Now, I never touch them. I did not touch them at any time. I have not touched them yet. Then I've got this done. I'll actually close up my primer tray, let it set nicely on my bench. I'll get my positive RAM priming unit into the press, make sure I have the correct shell holder in the press. Then I'll go in, as I said, wash my hands absolutely thoroughly, then back out, and I'm going to start handling those primers. That is actually the same process that we use for the 9mm Luger that we've been loading. 9mm Luger is not out here on the table. Again, at this point, even for demo, I'm not going to have anything else out on these benches. No place for a mistake. I don't want any small pistol primers out here. Nothing like that. I'm going to be very, very careful to make sure I'm crafting safe and reliable, and hopefully also some pretty precise ammunition. Now, on the extreme reloading side, we're going to see some variability in the primer seating depth when we use a RAM unit that is inserted or installed on a reloading press. To kick it up a notch, as they say, what I like to use is this 21st century priming tool. And I can't say enough good about this. This is really a wonderful priming tool. You're going to be able to feel it. Now, that's one thing. But this has got, like, I think it's 1/1000th or less adjustments at each click. Right? So you set it. You're going to feel that. Yeah, that's where I want it. You can also measure it with that digital calipers. And once you have it set for what you're going to load today, don't make any more changes to it. Then you're going to prime one case after another, after another, after another. Same process, washing your hands and all that stuff, because you are going to handle those primers. Place them in that primer cup right there, and away you go. Much, much better consistency in primer seating depth with this. But, of course, we can still craft very nice, safe, reliable ammo with the RAM priming units on your reloading press. Quite a bit less expensive to go that route. Now, one more step real quick, or quick note, before I actually start priming, and that is to take the lot number off of the box of primers. This is Federal F34Q03. It looks like that. Yep. And I write that down. That's the lot number. I'll write that down on my checklist. There's actually a spot for it, the RAM or device that I'm using, and then any comments because remember, I want to go back and read these the next just before the next time I do some more reloading. So that comment section, anything at all that you think, that's a little bit different or whatever, I want to go ahead and put that into your comments. Anything you think you might want to know about next time. When you're priming, as you're moving or actuating that lever, that handle, whether it's a positive RAM priming unit on the press or something like the handheld 21st century unit, if you feel a lot of resistance, don't go heavy-handed on it, right? It could detonate right there. That means there's something wrong. Hopefully, you've done a very, very good job of swaging and removing that military crimp on this type of ammo, etc., etc. Should not have any problems, but if you do, back off and figure out what's happening. All right, my 5.56 cases are now done. They are all primed. Things went well. And I'm going to now repeat the process, almost exactly the exact same process. Just going to use small pistol primers for my 9mm cases that are waiting in the house. Hey, thanks a bunch for watching. Tune in next time for our next episode of Extreme Reloading.